The 8 conditions. The POPI Act has 8 conditions. That's a matter of fact, a matter of record, and it's something you can discover quite easily by reading the Act. The purpose of this element, though, isn't to talk about the 8 conditions themselves in isolation. What they are, how they work, and all that will be addressed in other portions. The purpose of this section is actually to address something more fundamental. What do we mean and understand by the word, term, phrase, conditions? It might seem a little strange. After all, surely conditions is easy to explain. And that may be true, but if we don't define what it is we mean by certain words and phrases, then we run the risk of diverging from each other as we move forward. After all, the 8 conditions are critical in setting the context for POPI. So let me give you my interpretation, my understanding, my viewpoint on what I believe is meant by the word conditions. There are actually multiple ways you can interpret the word conditions. The most common that I've heard when it comes to POPI gives the interpretation that it's 8 specific rules. For example, you will only lawfully be processing data under the POPI Act if you adhere to and apply the 8 specified conditions. Or another way to think about it is your lawfulness of processing is conditional upon you adhering to the details and rules and measures contained in the POPI Act. Personally, I find these approaches quite prescriptive, short-sighted, but it does seem to be the prevailing viewpoint amongst some of our more traditionally legally minded practitioners. This is probably based upon historic training and experience of more rules-based legislation, but always remember this. The POPI Act is a new type of legislation, principles-based, not an old rules-based one. Therefore, it looks to give you the broader guidance of what things are and how they could be, rather than the specifics of what they have to be. So, with that in mind, this is how I view the concept of conditions. It colours my viewpoint and my approach to the Act. Does it mean I'm correct? Who knows? I'm just giving you my viewpoint. So let me explain what I mean by conditions. POPI is new. It covers an area that is not well entrenched in South Africa yet, data privacy. Therefore, it would be impractical and, to use a phrase that comes up a lot in the Act, not reasonable to assume that people and organizations could successfully adhere to it immediately. Thus, the required conditions need to be developed, not simply put in place. I like to imagine POPI as being a bit like a gardener. Gardeners do not grow crops. Gardeners provide the correct conditions for crops to grow. Put simply, your role is to provide the conditions that will enable your crop to flourish. The more successful you are in creating these conditions, the better your crop. My perspective is that, yes, there are some critical rules that need to be applied, but our primary objective is to try and create the correct conditions for the POPI Act to flourish in our organizations. If we do it this way, I think we'll have a far richer, far more effective, far more practical solution and successful way of keeping people's information protected.